原田さんいらっしゃいますか？
Zoom に。Zoom ミーティング。
はい、いますよ。アレックスに
破
りされてきました。Hi, Matthew. Nice meeting you.
紹介しないとあれですか。これから最終の最後のクロージングキーノートの、マシュー・スケルトさんが書いてるチームトポロジーの日本語の翻訳を担当してます原田紀郎さんが来てくれてるので、ちょっとお話を伺っていいんですかね。はい。はい、じゃあ急ですけど、紀郎さん大丈夫ですか？
はい、
なんか振っちゃって。
So Matthew, we have some time to
すみませんが、何かお願いします。
はい、こんにちは。アトラクターの原田と言います。チームトポロジーという本をですね、去年の終わりぐらいに出たんですけど、おかげさまで重版しておりまして、みんなに読んでいただいて大変嬉しく思います。で、アジャイルチーム、フィーチャーチームっていうのができてですね、そうやって、価値を顧客にちっちゃなチームで直接届けるんだっていうことをやってきて、だんだんそういうことができる、組織も増えてきたんですけど、じゃあ、それだけでできるのか、他の組織どうすんの？じゃあ、運用ってじゃあ、フィーチャーチームが全部できるの？できないよね。って言ったときにですね、じゃあ、顧客に直接価値を届けるチーム以外はどんな形にしたらいいんだろうっていうときにみんな悩んでたんですよね。そういったときに、どういう形にしたらいいかっていうときに、ストリームアラインドチーム、そう、価値の流れに沿ったチーム、イネーブリングチーム、先を見つけるチーム、プラットフォームチーム、そのストリームアラインドチームが動けるような基盤を作るチーム、で、コンプリケーテッドサブシステムチーム、ちょっと難しい技術などを引き取って作るチーム、そういった類型をやることで、だいぶシステムの作り、組織の作り方を語れるようになってきました。はい。っていうところで今日はですね、マッシュさんに話して打たれるので、これからインタビューを聞いて、その後チームトポロジーを読んでみて、皆さんの組織をどうするともっとうまく DevOps がやれそうかっていうのをやっていただけるといいかと思います。はい。どうもありがとうございます。
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Matthew in? I think we can see. Okay, so from here we should do the setup as we had before with cameras, and we can start. Okay. Let's begin. All right, thank you. Thank you again, everyone, and especially Matthew for joining us this, in your morning and in our afternoon. We really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Alex. It's great to be here.
It's unfortunate that you couldn't join us in person, but I think that this interview will give us a good chance to learn a little bit more about Team Topologies directly from the author. So we're very excited to have you share some of your insights and knowledge on this topic. So you and I actually have gone back for many years, and you and I have known each other for, I think, around 10 years or so. We first met, if I remember correctly, at a DevOps event in London almost 10 years ago. Now,
yes.
Yeah, and one of the topics that came up in that meeting, in that, I think in that DevOps conference was about what comes first, tools or culture? And I think at the time, that was a big question. Do you think people are still asking that question today, tools versus culture?
I think some people might be asking that question. But I think many people now understand that there's a more valuable question to ask. And I think the more valuable question is this: how do tools, teams, incentives, ways of working shape the culture that we want? How do we use tools, teams, incentives, and so on to shape a good culture to help us?
So we've evolved a little bit past sort of the initial culture building and are now onto the next phase in growth, which is kind of the relationships between teams and the organization as a whole.
I think so.
Yeah, and I think that part of that is where your research and your writing comes in with Team Topologies. Now, the book is called Team Topologies, and what I think is interesting is that in English, the subtitle of the book is Optimizing Software Team Interactions for Fast Flow.
Yep.
Now, it's a little bit different in Japanese in so much as it has, you know, there's one word in there, teikyo gata, which focuses a little bit on adaptability. Can you tell me a little bit about what your title means in English and what do you mean by optimizing for fast flow?
Yeah, thank you. So when with modern technologies like cloud technologies and modern practices and modern tools, we can have many changes to the software systems in a single day. We can have 100 changes to these software systems to the live system in a single day. This is kind of new normal. This is our almost like a starting point. And this means that it's possible in an organization, you know, many hundreds of people or even thousands of people, to have many independent streams of change to different systems, each stream deploying, changing many times a day. And that's what we mean by fast flow.
It sounds a lot like agile to me. What's the difference between, you know, this idea of fast flow and agile?
Good question. So remember where agile came from. Agile came from 20 years ago, the late 1990s, when the standard at that time was one software change every year. One software change every year, or even one software change every 3 years. And Agile came along at the early 1990s, saying we can make changes every 2 weeks. And at the time, that was very rapid. That was very rapid. Whereas now, if we only make changes to our software systems every 2 weeks, that's very slow. So a lot of the context around the original Agile methodologies was in the context of very slow changes. And what we've seen, unfortunately, is that some people who are very kind of fixated, very passionate about the original Agile approaches, are stuck in this world of 2-week changes. And what we really need to be thinking about is how do we get 100 changes into the live systems every day, because that's valuable for customers.
I see. So it's not just about getting, 2-week sprints out from an engineering standpoint, but getting the whole business to think in terms of agility and multiple changes at once, hundreds of changes, as you say, in, different sprints and different cycles.
Exactly. And it's even beyond that. It's not just about lots and lots of things going to production. What we need to be able to do is to have true kind of business agility. The organization itself needs to be nimble and to be able to recognize when things have changed and to be able to change direction. And it was interesting we were talking, weren't we, before the Zoom call now, and the subtitle of the Team Topologies book in Japanese, you'll be able to read it out, or the interpreters will be able to read it. But in English, the subtitle is something like "An Adaptive Organizational Design to Provide Valuable Software Quickly." It's the adaptive aspect. Yeah, exactly. It's the adaptive aspect, which is really important. This is not, Team Topologies is not about a fixed organizational design or pattern. It's not about it being fixed. It's about it being able to adapt. We're listening to what's happening, and we're able to adapt the design and the principles and responsibilities so that we have true organizational agility.
So what I'm hearing is that once an organization is able to deliver software at an agile pace, using that, doing agile 2-week sprints, now the rest of the organization needs to learn how to use that tool to adapt itself quickly. Do you have any kind of examples of what maybe an old organization looked like and a new organization that is adaptive, that's, that has accomplished business agility? What does that look like specifically for kind of the old not a non-agile business and an organization that's adaptive in business agility?
That's a great question. And there's an example from the UK where I live. During the, I think it was during the early part of the pandemic, so 2020 and 2021, the health system in the UK, in England, where I live, we had to provide booking systems for vaccinations and to enable citizens to then find their test results, so their COVID test results, to be able to book a vaccination and to be able to get test results quickly. So this clearly is something which did not exist before. And what happened is that the teams of software engineers, software people, and medical experts were able to use the Team Topologies ideas to work together really effectively to be able to create these software services for vaccination, test results, this kind of thing, very, very rapidly. And that kind of speed where we can create and define and update a service, in the very short space of time, is an example of the kind of capability that we can expect if we use approaches like Team Topologies.
So the Team Topologies enables the business to adapt to just these unforeseen changes and unforeseen situations like the pandemic. And it's not just about software, it's a way of thinking, it sounds like.
I would say yes, is a way of thinking. We expect to need to change. We expect to need to change direction, focus, how something is built. This contrasts with a mindset, a set of expectations from 10, 15, 20 years ago, where we are going to build the software and then we're going to release it and then we're finished. That mindset is not helpful. The mindset we need is we are going to evolve this software on an ongoing basis, and we're going to do it many times a day. It's a very different mindset.
And Team Topologies lets you do that with the business as a whole. And there was something that I thought was really interesting in the book, where you talked about the idea of decoupling business concepts. And, you know, when I read that, it was a little hard to understand at first, but I wonder, you know, the way that you said it, in the old days, you would build a whole large system, plan it, you know, years in advance. We would call that, you know, a monolith. Today, we break it down into microservices. Is that what you mean by decoupling business concepts? Or decoupling business concepts? Can you expand on how that helps and what that means?
Yes. So your example there with monolith and microservices it's close to it's close to what we mean, but not exactly. Historically in the past, if we're building software that is just one big package of software, you might call it a monolith, then we can have different business concepts, all kind of, I'm about to use the English word smooshed. It's not a real word.
I don't even know what that word means.
Smoosh. all kind of mashed together, all tangled together. We've got the concepts tangled together in many cases, not always, but in many cases. And it doesn't matter so much, because we are going to just have this single block of code and we're going to release it. And that's kind of fine. We don't need to have these things separate. However, if we want to have multiple separate streams of change, because there's value there, we need to be able to go quickly, then we need each of these streams of change to be independent. We should not be tangled with the other streams. And so there's a huge value in separating these ideas at a business level. So even how different streams of change are funded or financed, like where do we put the money, and splitting it right at that business concept level, so that there is true separation of these different concepts as we then make the software to implement these ideas. And so decoupling it means separation, basically. Separating things that really are logically separate from a business perspective, and separating that right at the kind of, if you like, at the top of the organization. So different executives or managers or leaders seeing the value in keeping those things separated.
Can you give a concrete example of where a business went from a tightly coupled operational model and having different, you know, tightly intertwined concepts versus one where it's decoupled? Have you seen that, you know, like any examples that you can share about a specific business function or something along those lines that was decoupled as part of this transformation?
That's a good question. I mean, we've got that. There are many examples on the Team Topologies website. If you go to teamtopologies.com, we've got some examples there. But more fundamentally, I mean, this decoupling is it's not a new thing in Team Topologies. People organizations were doing this decoupling before we wrote the book. This is not unique to Team Topologies. Let's make that clear. The decoupling had been proven as an approach, 10, 15 years before we wrote the book.
Could we say that?
I mean, the best
could
example
we say
is Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services have been keeping their services decoupled and logically separate for 20 years, and they've grown huge. It's an approach to scaling, basically, which helps with scaling.
I see. So something like product-minded thinking might be helping towards this approach. What about outsourcing? Is outsourcing a form of that's very popular in Japan, to outsource certain business functions? Is that getting us on the right track when we're talking about business decoupling and understanding what that means?
Outsourcing can be good and bad. And the key aspect is, where do you put the boundary? Where is the boundary between the organization and the outsourced capability? Because if the boundary is in the flow of change, then when we come to this outsourced boundary, there's a danger that we have a waiting, that we're waiting for something to be able to move forward. And so that's not a good boundary. That's not a good use of outsourcing. But if we're outsourcing something which is not core, which is not central to the organization's mission, then we might get real value from outsourcing. Because then let's say we use an outsourced platform of some kind. We're able to have a flow of change which uses something from this platform and then can go really quickly. So I would say outsourcing is neither good or bad. It's really important to understand the outsourcing boundary. Does that boundary help with flow, or does it block flow?
And that makes sense then, how outsourcing is part of this change flow. And when we're talking about Team Topologies is really about enabling change, and that's really where everything is going towards, is the flow of change. It's largely something that has to do with software teams. So maybe we should start and sort of just understand who do you see on a software team? Is this all engineers? Has the definition of software team evolved over the years?
That's a great question. I mean, the first thing I should say is people are using Team Topologies ideas outside of software. They're using it for,
so this can go far-reaching beyond.
Like legal teams, marketing teams, human resources. Lots of. We know many organizations are using these patterns outside of software, which is great. Our focus in the book is on software teams because that's what we know. That's our background. The authors. I'll answer your question. What skills should we have inside a team that is building software? Well, let me just share my screen, and I've got a few slides to try and help answer this question.
Oh, great. It came right up.
That's looking good.
Okay.
So
stream align team. Great. Okay, I can see that here.
So in Team Topologies, I've got can you see my mouse as well? Can you see my mouse on the screen?
Yes, it's coming through.
Good. So if we want changes to move as smoothly as possible with no waiting, we need a team that has end-to-end responsibility for those changes. And this team has ongoing responsibility for that software service. So they care for it. they nurture it, they look after it, they make the changes, they build it, and they run that service. Because that's the
so a stream
context.
aligned team. I'm sorry. A stream aligned team is one that has a lot of responsibility for seeing changes throughout the life cycle.
Exactly. Yep. And this team has all the skills that they need, that it needs to make those changes happen. So to answer your question, what kind of skills go inside this team? It depends what the team is focused on. If this team is focused on something that is very, very much about kind of user experience, then they will have a greater amount of user experience capability and skills in the team. If this team is focused on something that uses machine learning, then they'll have more machine learning skills inside the team. But they have an ongoing responsibility for that service or software product.
And this team seems like it's one that might be aligned to a topic we had earlier today. This might be where a mob programming type of team comes in. If I'm understanding this correctly, is this where mob programming could really empower a stream aligned team?
Absolutely, because inside this team, we might have a mix, where we will have a mix of skills. People who can write code, people who can understand how to test, people who understand cloud systems. Maybe we have in the team a subject matter expert on something like financial compliance or legal compliance or something like that. There might be value in having that skill in the team permanently on an ongoing basis, because then the whole team can come together doing mob programming or ensemble programming all together, solve these challenges all together with all of that expertise. And we discover that, we do not need to build this thing, or this thing. We just don't need to do it. Not necessary. We've saved ourselves a lot of time. Or we might discover, it's really important that we build it like this so that it's more testable, or it's more compliant, or something else like this. We're getting all of that insight together at the same time. And because we as a team are responsible long-term for that service, it makes sense for us to come together, because we're all responsible inside that team for the service. It's our software, it's our service. So it makes a lot of sense for us to work together on a regular basis like this.
Now, this isn't in Team Topologies, you mentioned that there's other types of teams. What else is there outside of a stream aligned team?
Good question, thank you. So our starting point is the streamlined team, because this is how we get multiple fast flows of change through the organization. There is no handoff to other people. It's end-to-end our software. Now you can see in the diagram that we get feedback from the live environment. Those green arrows coming back, that's telemetry and data from the live environment feeding back into our team, helping us to become aware of how that service is working in the live environment. So we're very, very aware of how well our service is working. And over time, we might take on more and more responsibility. So to help us to build and run this service, we might decide to learn a bit more about cloud technology, or a bit more about machine learning, or a bit more about JavaScript, whatever. But at some point, we now have too many things to think about. We're thinking about too much. We have exceeded, we've gone over the cognitive load limit for our team. We've exceeded the cognitive load limit. So what we call in Team Topologies, what we call team cognitive load.
And a team cognitive load, to understand that, it basically, I think you explained it, but I wanted to confirm the my understanding. Once a team, in particular, any team, but a stream-aligned team, as their product or their service, whatever they're working on, just gets more and more complex. There's too many details. Maybe they wrote a service, but it's grown in complexity over a year. Is that what you mean by exceeding the cognitive load?
It's one example. It's one example. And so in Team Topologies, we emphasize the importance. It's really important to use team cognitive load as a design, as a fundamental design input, as a way to guide the shape and size of software services. What we want is for services to be team sized. They are sized for the team. We are not asking the team to do more than they can handle effectively. Because if we ask them to do more than they can handle, something will go wrong. They will miss something. They will not be able to meet the user needs in the best way possible. So that is.
Is there a good way to measure the cognitive load of a team, or is that just something that you learn over time?
Yes. Let me come back to that question in a minute or two. There, I think it would be so. You're right. It's important that we find ways to measure team cognitive load. Let me just come back to that in a minute. I'll answer your previous question, which is there are three other types of team that we talk about in Team Topologies. Enabling team in purple, complicated subsystem team in orange, and platform team shown in blue. But these three types of team really only exist to reduce the cognitive load in the streamlined teams, to help the streamlined team be independent and maintain that fast flow of change. And that is a very different perspective, a very different way of thinking about different types of team.
Can you talk a little bit about what an enabling team versus, I think the words are great, like the enabling team empowers, but what are some of the examples of some of these teams that you've seen in, some concrete examples or other ways to show how the difference between stream-aligned and enabling versus platform is?
Sure. So a streamlined team has a clear mission to deliver useful changes to its customers or users. The enabling team in purple is a team of experts in a particular area that helps to increase the capability and knowledge inside the streamlined team. So the experts might be experts in, for example, machine learning. So we've got some experts in machine learning. They help the streamlined team to become more aware of how to use machine learning. And the enabling team helps them for 2 days, 2 weeks, something like this, a short period of time. But then after that interaction, the streamlined team is now independent again. They've increased their awareness. They've reduced their cognitive load because they understand how to use machine learning better. And now they can be independent. And it's a similar dynamic with complicated subsystem and platform. The complicated subsystem is taking like some difficult algorithm. Maybe it's video processing. Maybe it's financial transactions, something like this that's very involved. So we're able to put the cognitive load into that complicated subsystem team effectively. That allows the streamlined team just to use that system without exceeding their cognitive load.
So enabling is about skills and expertise and bringing in sort of, maybe we could even say almost consultants about a particular skill or service. Complicated subsystems, institutional knowledge and capturing organizational complexity into smaller units. Is that a good way to sort of differentiate those two types of teams?
That's one way. And the other way is that an enabling team will interact with the streamlined team just temporarily, on a temporary basis, maybe for 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 weeks. But a streamlined team might use a complicated subsystem all the time on an ongoing basis. And in the same way, a platform team might provide a service to a streamlined team, and that service might be used on an ongoing basis.
And I think this is where the interactions between these different types of teams and these different teams really start to come in. Let's talk a little bit about what that looks like, the collaboration, X as a service, and these. What do these mean?
Exactly. So we felt it was important to define or suggest some ways in which teams can think about interacting, because that was missing. That kind of that mindset or that way of thinking was missing from all of the previous discussion and discourse about, agile software development. And so we wanted to make it much clearer to provide a language for people to use when thinking about how they're interacting with other teams in the organization. And what we came up with is these 3 interaction types. Collaboration, that's shown in purple here with the cross-hatching. So 2 teams are working together for a defined period of time to achieve a specific outcome. Usually they're working together to discover exactly what a boundary should look like. That's the purpose usually. It could be something else, but usually we're trying to establish who should be responsible for what. And that collaboration might take days or weeks, because collaboration is kind of expensive. It's expensive because we slow down. It's expensive because we're blurring the boundaries of responsibility. But it's valuable because we might find a good boundary, a boundary that really works well for flow. And so then we might change into a different way of interacting, which could be X as a service. One team is providing something and one team is consuming something as a service. And that interaction, if we have a good boundary, the X as a service interaction scales very well. We might be able to use that for many months or even years if we found a good boundary.
And this is where you mentioned the importance of splitting the business components. We're breaking the business functionality. The more you do that, the more you can turn collaboration into X as a service, reduce the cost of collaboration, but have that better interaction as you're describing it between the teams.
Exactly. What we're aiming for is for most of the time, streamlined teams are like down here at the bottom. They're consuming something as a service. So this streamlined team in the middle, towards the bottom of the slide, is consuming some service from the platform team in blue. Oops. And it's consuming a service as a service from the complicated subsystem team. This streamlined team in the middle here, it does not really need to interact very much with these two teams. We've found a good boundary. We found a good set of responsibilities. And this streamlined team can just consume these services. And so it feels very smooth. It feels that they can be independent. They can do their work. They can deliver new changes very smoothly without waiting. But of course, sometimes a streamlined team might need to work together with another team to find a better boundary. And in this diagram here, that's what we're seeing. The streamlined team at the top is collaborating with this complicated subsystem team to find a boundary that works better for flow. Because that's what we're always thinking about. We're looking for boundaries that work for flow. That's what's happening here.
So
but the important thing here is this diagram is just like a photograph. It's just like a snapshot in time. This week, this is what our organization looks like. In 3 weeks' time, 3 weeks in the future, or 3 months in the future, the diagram might look different because we're doing different things.
So this
the
is
interactions evolve. It's adaptive. That's where the adaptive aspect comes in. This is not a fixed design for the organization. We are expecting the interactions to change.
So you're really not looking to turn. This is not what a org chart is supposed to look like. This is more of a metric or a tool to understand the relationships between teams and more help them work together towards the flow of change.
Exactly.
Okay. No, that's really helpful. So if we see these if we see team topologies as a means of identifying types of teams and the 3 types of interactions that you've identified to talk about the collaboration and interaction between those teams, what does that get us in terms of how does that help teams individually and the organization as a whole increase the flow of change? What does team topologies do by showing us all these things?
That's a nice question. So when we have teams that are aware of the team types, and when those people in the teams are aware of the team interaction modes, then let's say we are in a situation like this at the top with this streamlined team at the top. They're currently collaborating with the complicated subsystem team, but that collaboration has been going on for 3 weeks. It's too long. It starts to be too long. The team can be aware of that and go, this collaboration feels like it's not succeeding. It's not finding a useful boundary for flow. It's taken too long. We need to step back and say, are we focused on the right thing? Do we have enough awareness and capability to be able to find that good boundary? Are we looking in the wrong place for a boundary for flow? So that's an example of how it can help to keep people focused on good boundaries for flow. They might realize they need some help from an enabling team to help them increase their capability. So maybe that's what they're doing here with the enabling team here. They're getting some help to find a good boundary from that enabling team, these experts. But we're now focused on the team's core mission, and we're focused on making sure we have good boundaries for flow. And that's our kind of everyday focus when we're working with other teams. And it's a different mindset, basically. It's a much more useful mindset compared to the mindsets that we had in the past with previous approaches. It really helps everyone to focus on flow, multiple flows of change in the organization.
That makes a lot of sense. And this sounds a lot like a tool for upper level, for executive management, something that at the top of an organization, when you use team topologies, you can use it as a tool to help adapt, help become more adaptive, to become, to increase the flow of change. Where would you suggest an organization? And, a lot of the folks here are engineers, engineering managers. How can we use team topologies at that level to maybe, do we introduce it to our organization? How do we take these ideas and get started with getting some of the benefits of identifying different team types? What would you suggest we start at?
It's a great question. Thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen now. I think we've covered all that. So one of the things that we wanted to do in Team Topologies, and I think we did do it, is to speak to everyone in the organization, execs, kind of managers or architect people, and people, practitioners, engineers. So engineers can use Team Topologies to think about the different types of team. Hey, what would happen if we adopted these team types? What would we need in place to make those effective? What's missing? Also think about the team interactions. Hey, what would happen if we started to use the team interaction modes in our organization right now? Let's be more mindful about the collaboration. Let's make sure if we're collaborating with another team, let's make the focus to find a good boundary for fast flow.
So we can think of team topology. Oh, go ahead.
On this very kind of day-to-day level, day-by-day level, we can start to make our interactions more purposeful, more defined.
So a lot of this, it's almost like, I don't want to use the word design patterns, but that's what's coming to my mind is, you're not necessarily trying to build a certain team topology or using it to measure and identify how your teams are working so you can optimize the flow. Maybe similar to design patterns. Is that a good way for us to think about that? Is it's like design patterns, but for teams?
Yes, I think that's true. I think what it really is effectively a kind of meta pattern, it's a pattern for generating patterns, a set of rules or heuristics or clues that help us to think about different patterns, like a pattern generator, perhaps, something like that. And that's what other people, that's how other people see it. This is for sure.
So that's great. And I think it's a really easy, I mean, in general, easy to, once you learn it and understand the topics, it's a really good tool for, like you said, everyone at all levels of the organization to, to understand. So I have a lot more questions and we could talk on this all night long, I'm sure. But I'd like to see if there's anybody, here so we have actually a couple rooms. We've got the English room here, the Japanese room where they're doing the translations. Is there anybody in this room that had any questions that you would like, Matthew to answer about team topologies, organizations, and those sorts of things? And while we wait, if there's anyone in the Japanese room or I suppose in Discord too, if anybody sees questions, let's get, we'll get those rolling if anybody has questions. But in the meantime, I think that what would be really interesting for us to hear is, can you tell us like a case study or some story of how using team topologies at an organization helped bring them towards the flow of change?
Sure. There's a case study on the Team Topologies website from an organization called Pure Gym. They are the largest gym operator in the UK. They've got more than 1 million members. And so this is an example of an organization where software is not the only thing. Their main focus clearly is they've got hundreds of gyms around the country, with all the gym equipment, all the weights and all the running machines and all of this stuff. But software helps to enhance that service, helps to enhance that experience for their customers. Pure Gym were at a point where they needed to expand. They needed to make software changes much more rapidly. The software is used for things like attracting new customers, helping customers to book an appointment or a slot at the gym so they can go and do a gym session, manage their payments, these kind of things. Before looking at Team Topologies, they had the business concepts were all kind of tangled together. So the idea of like a new customer was tangled with an existing customer, and that was tangled together with payments and bookings and all sorts of things all together in one big monolith, like you said before. So one of the first things they did is to think, well, what are the logically separate ideas in our business? Maybe I should just share my screen so you can see what this looks like. I'll just find it, Pure Gym. I'll just share my screen again, just very, very quickly, so you can see what I'm talking about. Here we go.
Oh, and it looks like, oh, great. Someone shared this in the Discord too already. That's brilliant. Great.
So this is
yeah.
With. And they talk about how they're having all kinds of problems with things going wrong because there was not good separation between different parts of the systems, and the concepts were all tangled together. And so they talk about taking a team first approach. They were thinking, okay, what would happen if we had teams responsible on an ongoing basis for different parts of our software? And they started to think, okay, let's list all of the things that happen on the website at the moment. There is joining, there is a live chat, there's payments, there's booking a class, and so on, all this stuff. And I thought, okay, what makes sense together? What makes sense to group these together? Which are the ideas or business concepts that belong together? And so that's what they've done in this diagram here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate areas. And then they started using the Team Topologies ideas like collaboration using enabling teams. And then they started to define a platform and offering some services, but it's still evolving. So they're using the ideas and the language and the interaction types to help them think through what is effective and to discover these good boundaries for fast flow. So it's a really useful example.
So it's showing us that, again, I think this is a good reinforcement that Team Topologies is a tool. and the gym company, use this to continue to measure and understand and change their organization using Team Topologies. In other words, they didn't design a new org chart using Team Topologies. It's learning how to use the tool to design and push through changes. That's great.
It's back to that word adaptive that you mentioned before. That's in the subtitle of the Japanese book. We're expecting to adapt and change the organization.
We had another question that came in over the Discord, and it was how to measure the cognitive load of teams. If there's you can talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So it's quite involved. But if we're going to measure it comprehensively, it's quite involved. And at Team Topologies, we are working on a tool to measure team cognitive load. And we hope to have something available later this year. However, we can start just with something very straightforward. We can just ask the question. Something like, do you feel like you understand enough about the software that you're working with? Maybe you have yes or no, or maybe you have it on a scale 1 to 5, something like this. A simple question like that. And ask people across the organization, just send a survey and see what people come back with. Because a lot of this is about the feeling that people have about how much spare mental capacity they have for working with these systems. So that's one approach. Just ask a simple question like how well do you feel you understand it? The second approach that we've seen recently is look at the number of software applications or services that one team is responsible for. So this team here is responsible for 27 different applications or services. A second team is responsible for 2 applications or services. Probably the first team will have higher cognitive load. Maybe. Because it's just the number of services is much higher. So that's actually a really straightforward measure. And use that as part of the assessment. Where might we have a problem? Which teams might have too much cognitive load at the moment, and what can we do about it?
That's a good, and I think as you develop that metric, the measurement tool too, I think that'll definitely help as well. So basically, yeah, just ask people and count how many applications and services they're managing as a starting point. So we had one other question, and it was about in the Discord chat, and it was, I closed the screen by mistake, but it was about how do you feel about strategically replacing team members? I think that's what sorry, if you could unlock that. Sorry. Okay. In Team Topology, what are your thoughts on strategically replacing or reassigning members between teams?
That's a great question. Thank you. I think the detail very much depends on what you mean by strategically replacing, because there are many different reasons for doing that. Some reasons for that are good, and some are very bad. But what we do have is this book here called Dynamic Reteaming. Now, I know that there's a version in English language because I'm holding it in my hand. I do not know if there's a Japanese language version yet, possibly not. But in this book here, there are patterns for changing teams in a way that is healthy. and it's very compatible with Team Topologies. So if you are going to, and you should have some slow change of the team membership, then make those team membership changes healthy by following some patterns like these kind of patterns here. The important thing is to make those team changes healthy. Make sure the way you do it is does not destroy the team dynamic. That's the important thing.
Oh, great. And let's see if we have we have another question here in Japanese, but who is the right person to be the flag waving person to use team topology to drive change? So who's kind of the the lead? Who's the person to lead the change when you want to share changes across these teams?
It's a good question. Thank you. I think in practice, what we need is champions at different levels of the organization. We need a champion at the executive level who says, this stuff is great. We're going to do this. We need to optimize for fast flow. Go and make it happen. Fine. We need people at the engineering level or on a practitioner level who say, yes, this feels good. It feels human or humane. It feels like it's a positive thing for me. I'm going to do what I can at a on the ground level, if you like. I'm going to listen for these interactions. I'm going to be aware of team dynamics. But also we need it at the kind of manager or architectural level in the middle. People who are looking across multiple teams and able to change how they work so that their focus is now on enabling a fast flow. So instead of trying to manage lots of dependencies, we're now trying to avoid the dependencies and keep these teams independent, keep them separate, decoupled. So I think it's important that we have champions or flag wavers at multiple different levels of the organization, really, to make it effective.
So not necessarily, a single driver to bring it in, but getting a lot of people aligned to understand team topologies will help us learn, and everyone kind of working towards similar goals, maybe. Excellent, excellent. Well, this was fantastic. We are running, a little bit over on our time, but this was such a treat, Matthew. This is great to chat with you remotely, and we again appreciate you taking your morning to meet with us. I hope that you can come, in person sometime soon and introduce some of these ideas to us.
That would be so great. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and for the opportunity to speak and join DevOpsDaysTokyo.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.